The sky above the small mining colony was always dark, filled with the dust and smoke from the machines that tore the planet's crust for precious minerals. Life was quiet here, almost boring, but the people liked it that way. They were far from the politics and wars of the galaxy. No one in the colony thought they were important enough to be noticed by the great powers. That changed on a cold, still night. The stars above began to vanish, one by one, swallowed by a shape so massive that it blocked out the heavens. At first, the colonists thought it was a shadow from a nearby moon, but the shadow kept moving, slow and steady. A deep vibration rolled through the ground, making cups and plates shake in the workers' mess hall. Some of the older miners froze, their faces pale. They had heard stories about a human warship, the Behemoth, as it was called by those who feared it. Its real name was the ISS Retribution. No one had ever seen it and lived to tell the story in person. The rumors said it could destroy an entire city in seconds, turn oceans into boiling clouds, and leave planets nothing but wastelands. Other stories claimed its weapons could reach across space, striking without warning. But the most frightening rumor of all was that it never showed mercy. A low hum filled the air, deep enough to be felt in the bones. The colonists stepped outside their homes, looking up, and saw it for the first time. The Retribution drifted silently above them, its black hull swallowing the starlight. Rows of heavy cannons lined its sides, glowing faintly with blue light. Massive railgun turrets slowly rotated, scanning the surface as if the ship itself was alive and watching. Children clung to their parents. Even the miners, who had spent years working under dangerous conditions, felt small and powerless. I guess. This was not a ship. They realized it was a floating fortress, bigger than any building they had ever seen. It moved with a kind of slow, terrible grace, like a predator that had no need to rush. Inside the colony's small control tower, alarms blared. The local governor shouted into a communicator, begging for identification. There was no reply. Humans aboard the Retribution never spoke to their targets before deciding what to do. They observed, calculated, and acted. For the people below, not knowing whether they would live or die in the next few minutes was torture. Some of the colonists ran for the underground shelters. Others stayed outside, frozen in place, staring at the huge warship above. The light from its engines painted the ground in shifting blue shadows, and the heat radiating from its reactors made the air shimmer. Then the sound came. It was not loud like an explosion, but low and steady, a deep mechanical growl as the ship's main weapons began to charge. The very air seemed to vibrate with the energy building inside the Behemoth's core. Everyone knew what this meant. The ship was preparing to fire. A woman named Sira, who worked as a mechanic, grabbed her little brother's hand and pulled him toward the shelter. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had heard about other worlds, peaceful farming planets, that were turned into scorched deserts within hours when the Retribution passed overhead. Those who survived often wished they hadn't. Above the colony, the warship's massive central cannon began to glow brighter, like a rising sun. The glow reflected off the metal roofs, casting sharp shadows across the dusty streets. The colony's governor made one last desperate call to the ship. Still no answer. The people could feel the moment stretch, each second like a lifetime. Every breath was a reminder that it could be their last. The silence was worse than any noise there. Were no threats, no demands. Just the heavy presence of a weapon capable of ending everything they knew. On board the Retribution, deep inside its armored hull, human crew members moved quietly between glowing control panels. The captain stood at the center of the command deck, his face hidden by the dim light. He had been given orders from Earth Command: confirm the target, then destroy it without hesitation. To him, it was another mission. To the people below, it was the end of their world. The captain's eyes moved over the data. The colony's ships were weak, no threat to his vessel. The scanners showed no human presence on the planet, only alien life. He remembered the reports how some colonies in this region had provided weapons to enemies of humanity. He did not know if this particular place was guilty. His orders said it didn't matter. Below, the colonists watched in horror as the glowing weapons reached full charge. The younger children cried. Some people prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Others clenched their fists in silent anger. A few whispered to each other that perhaps it would be quick. Perhaps they would not feel a thing when the beams struck. And then something strange happened. The hum of the weapons paused. The glow dimmed, just slightly. The great warship stopped, moving entirely, holding its position above the colony like a mountain in the sky. The sudden stillness was unnerving. It was as if the ship was thinking, deciding, judging the people below did not know it. But far above them, the captain's hand hovered over the final command. His crew waited for his order, their fingers ready over the firing controls. The only sound on the bridge was the soft buzz of the targeting systems. The warship hung there for what felt like an eternity. The colony below held its breath, caught between life and death, not knowing which would come. The stars around them seemed cold and distant. The air was thick with fear. And in that moment, every living being on the planet understood the truth. About humanity's behemoth, it did not need to roar to be terrifying. Its silence was enough to crush the soul. Whether it would fire or turn away, no one yet knew. But the arrival of the retribution had changed the colony forever. Even if they survived, the sight of that colossal shadow blotting out the stars would never leave their minds. Far above the mining colony, the retribution remained still for only a short while, and then the decision was made. Without any warning, the first shot was fired. It was not a single beam, but a rain of fire from the ship's railguns, streaks. A blue light cutting across the darkness of space before slamming into the enemy's moon fortress. The sound was felt more than heard. A deep, rolling thunder that shook the bones of every creature on the surface below. The fortress had stood for hundreds of years, a symbol of strength for the alien empire that ruled this region. Now, in less than a minute, it was nothing but dust floating in the void. Those who had been inside never even saw the sky fall on them. From the colony, people watched as the moon's surface split apart, massive cracks glowing with molten rock, as explosions tore it to pieces. The bombardment did not stop there. Orbital strikes began to rain down on the alien homeworld nearby. The first impact lit up the atmosphere like a second sun, flattening cities in a wave of heat and wind. Oceans boiled in places where the beams struck, sending walls of steam and water into the sky. Forests that had stood for thousands of years went up in flames in seconds. On the surface of that world, chaos reigned. Sirens blared in every city. Crowds rushed toward shelters, though many already knew there was no hiding from the power that hung above them. The sky was streaked with glowing trails of destruction, each one finding its target with perfect precision in the alien capital. A young officer named Varen stood on the balcony of the defense tower, watching his home burn. He had always been taught that humans were a weak species, too emotional, too fragile to stand against the older, more powerful empires. His commanders had told him humans only survived by luck, by hiding behind alliances and treaties. But now, as the retribution moved through the void like an unstoppable predator, Varen understood how wrong those lessons were. He clenched his fists, his heart filled with both rage and a strange fear he had never felt before. Around him, senior officers barked orders, their voices tight with panic. The planetary defense cannons opened fire, sending bursts of plasma into the sky. But every shot was intercepted before it could get close. The warship's shields shimmered, for a moment absorbing the blasts like rain hitting a window. From his position, Baran could see refugee ships struggling to leave the planet's atmosphere. Many did not make it. The Retribution's targeting systems locked on, and in moments, burning wrecks rained back down to the surface. The humans were not here to fight a battle. They were here to end a war by ending their enemies completely. The young officer's communicator buzzed. It was his mother's voice, trembling and desperate, telling him their family home had been destroyed. His younger sister was missing. The transmission cut off suddenly, replaced by static. Varen's vision blurred, his rage boiling over. He swore that if he survived this day, he would find the humans responsible and make them pay. But deep in his heart, another thought crept in, a thought he didn't want to admit. Maybe, just maybe, his people had brought this on themselves. He remembered the stories of alien raids on human colonies, the tales of settlements wiped out, families slaughtered. His empire had always claimed it was justified, that humans were expanding too far, taking resources that did not belong to them. But watching his own world burn, he could no longer ignore the possibility that this was simply revenge. Back on the Retribution, the crew worked with cold efficiency. Targeting officers called out coordinates, gunners confirmed strikes. Engineers monitored the steady drain of energy from the main reactor. There was no celebration, no joy in what they were doing. They were soldiers, carrying out orders, and those orders were simple. Leave nothing capable of harming humanity alive. On the bridge, Captain Elias Ward stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the destruction below. His face was calm, but inside, a storm raged. He had been to human colonies after alien attacks. He had seen the charred remains of homes, the empty cradles in burnt-out nurseries. Those images never left him. They were the reason he followed his orders without hesitation. Yet something in this mission felt different. These cities below were not battle stations. The people running in the streets were not soldiers. They were civilians, terrified, desperate, just like the human settlers he had once tried to protect. But the war had no room for mercy. One moment of hesitation, one act of compassion, could mean another attack on humanity years later. The ship's sensors showed clusters of heat. Signatures in certain districts, likely shelters or underground. Bunkers. Ward knew that the next volley would collapse those structures, burying everyone inside. He gave the order anyway, his voice low but steady. Moments later, the ground in those districts heaved and split, swallowing entire blocks in two. Fire and dust. On the alien world, Varen saw the flashes from those impacts and knew his parents were gone. The rage returned, stronger than before, burning away any doubt. He turned to his fellow officers and shouted that they would fight to the last breath. Even if they could not stop the behemoth, they could make the humans bleed. But their weapons were no match. The defense towers fell silent one by one. Their power cores ruptured by pinpoint strikes from orbit. The few surviving warships tried to form a last stand, but they were swatted aside like insects by the time the Retribution finished its attack. The alien homeworld was unrecognizable. The seas had turned to thick clouds. The forests were nothing. But ash and the once bright cities were craters glowing in the night. The planet still spun in space, but it was dead, its life stripped away in hours. The mining colony that had witnessed it all was silent. The people there had not been attacked, but they had seen enough to know what would happen if they ever stood against the humans. Parents told their children never to provoke Earth's anger, never to give the behemoth a reason to return. High above, the Retribution turned slowly, its engines burning a cold blue. It did not linger, did not speak. It simply moved on, seeking the next target in its endless mission. For the survivors below, that was the most chilling part, the realization that this was only one strike among many, and the warship would keep moving, leaving nothing but wastelands in its wake. Inside the Retribution, the sound of battle had faded, replaced by the steady hum of the ship's massive engines. The crew moved with calm precision, their faces lit by the glow of control screens. No one spoke loudly. There was no need. The mission was done. And now they were waiting for the captain's next order. Captain Elias Ward stood in the center of the bridge, his hands behind his back, staring at the tactical display. It showed a map of the sector, dotted with red markers, enemy strongholds that had already been destroyed. The alien homeworld they had just burned was now marked with a dull gray symbol. It meant the planet was no longer a threat. Ward's face was unreadable, but his mind was far from still. He thought about the images captured during the bombardment. People running in the streets, ships trying to escape, entire districts swallowed by fire. Some part of him wanted to push those images away, to see only the mission, not the faces. But they stayed in his head like ghosts. A young lieutenant approached with a data pad. "Orders from Earth's command, sir," she said quietly. Ward took the pad, reading the new instructions. They were clear, without a hint of hesitation. The war was still on, and their job had not changed. Eliminate all possible threats to humanity. Destroy all military facilities, supply chains, and any infrastructure that could support future attacks. Civilian casualties are to be considered unavoidable collateral. He placed the pad on the console and let out a slow breath. This was the third time in as many weeks that they had received orders to strike without any negotiation. It wasn't always like this. Years ago, the Retribution had been sent into hostile systems with warnings, first demands for surrender, offers to evacuate civilians. But after the massacres on Vesta Prime and New Arcadia, Earth's leaders had stopped asking questions. Now, the Retribution was the sharp blade of a policy built on fear. Ward's second-in-command, Commander Rin, stepped up beside him. "The crew is ready for the next target. Captain, will be in range within 30 hours. Ward nodded, but didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the smaller display showing the ship's sensor feed from the destroyed planet. Thermal scans showed faint heat signatures still moving in the ruins. Survivors, possibly thousands. They wouldn't last long. Without water, food, or shelter. They would either die slowly or be picked off by raiders from other systems. Rin followed his gaze. "We could finish them now, sir. One more volley and there'd be no chance of them rebuilding." Ward didn't reply. He knew what Rin was suggesting was tactically correct. Leave no survivors. It was the most effective way to make sure the enemy never rose again. But something inside him resisted. He thought of his own childhood on a distant human colony, the nights when the sky would light up with gunfire from pirate raids. He remembered hiding in the basement with his mother, waiting to hear if his father would come back from defending the settlement. He remembered the fear of being powerless. He also remembered the stories how human ships had once been symbols of hope, arriving in time to save the weak, not to crush them. But he had also seen the other side. He had walked through the ruins of human worlds attacked by alien fleets. On New Arcadia, he had carried the body of a child from the rubble of a school. On Vesta Prime, he had seen mothers screaming over the bodies of their children. He had sworn on those days that no human would ever feel that helpless again. If that meant destroying the enemy before they had a chance to strike, then so be it. Yet here he was, hesitating. The communications officer broke the silence. "Captain, we've intercepted enemy transmissions. They're rallying, they're remaining. Fleets, the survivors on the surface are calling for help. Reinforcements could be here in 48 hours. Ward straightened, pushing his doubts aside. Set course for the next target. Keep an eye on those transmissions. If their fleet enters the system, we deal with them before they get close. The bridge crew moved quickly to carry out his orders, but Ward could feel the weight of their eyes on him. Some of them had noticed his pause, his moment of hesitation. On a ship like the Retribution, hesitation could be dangerous in his private. Quarters later, Ward sat alone, reviewing the mission logs. He saw again the images of civilians running, the faces of children in the burning streets. He told himself that this was necessary, that every life taken now meant thousands of human lives saved later. But the line between necessity and cruelty was getting harder to see. His console chimed with a message from Earth Command. It was short, almost cold in tone. Maintain operational tempo. Victory depends on speed. Do not allow compassion to interfere with objectives. Ward stared at the words for a long time. He knew they were written for him. Someone at command had noticed his hesitation too. Still, he locked the orders into the system and leaned back in his chair. The Retribution was a machine built for war, and he was its captain. His personal feelings didn't matter. The galaxy didn't care about mercy. But deep inside, he wondered how many more missions like this he could complete before he stopped. Seeing the difference between defending humanity and becoming the very monster his enemies believed him to be. Outside his quarters, the Retribution sailed through the void like a silent predator. Its black hull absorbed the starlight, and the long lines of its weapons glowed faintly, ready for the next strike. Somewhere ahead, another world was waiting, unaware that the behemoth was coming. Ward knew the orders would not change. Destroy. Without hesitation, leave nothing behind. And so the warship would continue, turning planets into wastelands, carrying with it the shadow of humanity's unyielding will and the burden of the man who commanded it. The Retribution was gliding through the cold dark of space, heading toward its next target. The crew worked quietly, the bridge filled only with the soft hum of machinery and the occasional report from the officers. It had been a day since they left the burned planet behind, and the ship was running on routine scans, course adjustments, weapon checks. Nothing unusual. Then, without warning, a faint sound crackled through the communication systems. It was just a whisper at first, almost drowned by static, but it was enough to make the communications officer frown. She tapped the console, trying to filter out the interference. Slowly, the noise became clearer. It was a voice, not the deep, confident voice of a soldier or commander. This was high-pitched and trembling, broken by sobs. "Help, please. Can you hear me?" The officer froze for a moment before turning toward Captain Ward. "Sir, we've picked up a distress call. It's unusual." Ward stepped closer. "Unusual how?" She hesitated. "It's a child's voice, Captain. Not human, I think. It's from the planet we just left." The captain's brow tightened. "Put it on." The voice came through again, clearer this time. The language was halting, as if learned recently. "Please, someone, fire in the sky. My family, gone. I don't want to die." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member could hear it now, the fear and confusion in that small voice. It was not a threat. It was not propaganda. It was a cry for help. Ward's jaw clenched. He had heard many voices in distress during his career, but this was different. This wasn't a soldier calling for backup. This was a child. Alone in the ruins of a world, the Retribution had turned into a wasteland. Commander Rin broke the silence. "Sir, it's a trap. Has to be. They leave bait like this, hoping we'll land troops to rescue them. Then they hit us with an ambush." Some of the other officers nodded. It made sense. Enemy tactics had used false distress signals before. But the communications officer shook her head. "I've checked the signal, sir. It's weak, unshielded, no encryption. If this is a trap, it's the sloppiest one I've ever seen." Ward didn't answer right away. He looked at the tactical screen. The source of the transmission was deep inside one of the destroyed cities, in an area where his ship's weapons had hit hardest. There were no active defense systems there, no signs of military presence. Just a single, small heat signature. The child's voice came again, softer this time, almost fading. "Please, is anyone there?" Ward could feel the eyes of his crew on him. He knew what they expected him to do: ignore the signal and continue the mission. That was what the order said. Civilian survivors were not their concern. In war, mercy could cost lives. If he diverted resources to save one child, he could put the entire crew and mission at risk. But he also knew something else. If he ignored that voice, it would stay in his mind forever. Another ghost added to the growing number that haunted him. Rin's voice was firm. "Captain, we can't waste time on this. Every minute we delay gives the enemy more time to regroup. And if it is a trap, we could lose men for nothing." Ward turned away from him and stared out the large viewing window at the stars. In his mind, he could see the burned cities below, the collapsed buildings, the fires still smoldering. Somewhere down there, in all that death, a single small figure was calling into the darkness, hoping someone would hear. "Sir." The communications officer asked quietly. Ward finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "Pinpoint the signal. I want full scans of the surrounding area. If it's a trap, we'll know before we go in." There was a brief hesitation from the crew. Then the bridge came alive with activity. Scanners swept the ruins, searching for power sources, weapons, hidden ships. They found nothing, only rubble, ash, and that lone heat signature, Ward's. Decision came suddenly. Prepare a drop team, small unit only. We go in fast, we come out faster. If there's trouble, we pull out immediately. Rin stared at him. "Captain, this is against standing orders." "I know," Ward replied. His tone was final. "If command wants to question me later, they can. Like right now, that kid's not dying alone on a dead world if we can stop it." Within minutes, a small shuttle was prepped and loaded with supplies. The Marines chosen for the mission were silent as they strapped in. They had all heard the voice. No one said it out loud, but many of them wanted to go for the same reason their captain was sending them. Because they could not pretend they hadn't heard it, as the shuttle detached from the retribution. The crew on the bridge watched it disappear into the haze of the ruined atmosphere. The child's voice came through one last time on the comms. "Please, hurry." Ward stood at the center of the bridge, his hands tightening into fists. He knew every second the shuttle spent down there was a gamble. He also knew that this choice could cost him his career or his life. But at that moment, he didn't care. Because in the middle of a war where planets were burned without mercy, the cry of a single child had cut through all the noise, forcing him to remember why he had ever worn the uniform in the first place. Far below, in the ashes of a destroyed city, a small figure huddled in the dark, clutching something close to their chest. They did not know who would answer their call, or if anyone even would. But in the distance, through the smoke-filled air, they thought they heard the faint roar of engines drawing closer, and for the first time since the sky had turned to fire, the child felt a spark of hope. The shuttle cut through the smoke-filled skies of the ruined planet, its engines growling against the wind. Below, the city was nothing but a skeleton of blackened towers and broken streets. Fires still burned in the distance, sending pillars of dark smoke into the air. The Marines inside the shuttle stayed quiet, their faces hidden behind helmets, their hands gripping rifles. The heat outside was intense, but inside, the only thing heavier than the air was the silence. Captain Ward's voice came over there. "Comes, you're looking for one child. She's small, she's alone, and she's scared. Get her and get back. No detours, no delays. If there's trouble, I'm pulling you out." The pilot guided the shuttle lower, weaving between crumbling skyscrapers. Parts of the city glowed faintly where molten metal still ran down the sides of buildings. The streets were littered with overturned vehicles, their frames twisted from the blasts. Here and there, shadows moved, survivors or scavengers. But none dared to step into the open. The shuttle touched down in what used to be a park, now a field of ash and twisted playground equipment. The Marines moved out quickly, their boots crunching on broken glass. The air was thick with a smell of burnt metal and something worse, the smell of death. Sergeant Hale, leading the squad, checked his scanner. Signals close, 2 blocks north. They moved through the ruins, careful not to make unnecessary noise. Every sound seemed too loud here. The creak of unstable walls, the clatter of loose stones under their boots. Somewhere far away, a building collapsed with a dull roar, shaking the ground beneath them as they turned a corner. They saw the remains of a large apartment complex. Half of it had collapsed, and the rest leaned dangerously to one side. The signal was coming from inside. Hal raised a hand, signaling the others to spread out. Watch the upper levels. One wrong step, and this whole place comes down. Ellie entered through what used to be a lobby. The walls were blackened, the floor covered in debris. Old posters flapped weakly in the breeze coming through shattered windows. In the middle of the lobby, under a fallen beam, something small moved. It was her. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. Her skin a pale silver blue, her eyes wide and bright, even in the dim light. Her clothes were torn, and there was dust in her hair. She clutched a piece of paper tightly in her hands. When she saw the Marines, she froze like a cornered animal. Hale stepped forward slowly, lowering his weapon. "It's okay. We're here to help." She didn't understand all the words, but she recognized the tone. Her lips trembled, and then she whispered something in her own language. The translator on Hale's wrist clicked and translated, "Please, don't leave me." One of the Marines knelt beside her, gently lifting the beam off her. She was unhurt, but trembling badly. The paper in her hands turned out to be a photograph, 2 smiling adults, probably her parents, standing in front of a home that no longer existed. "Got her," Lay said into his comm, heading back, but as they started toward the door, movement caught Hale's eye. Figures were stepping out from the shadows of the ruined buildings around the park. At first, he thought they were other survivors, but then he saw the weapons. Contact. Ambush. Shots rang out, bright flashes lighting up the gloom. The Marines dropped behind cover, returning fire. The attackers were enemy soldiers, desperate and angry, and they had the advantage of numbers. The girl screamed and crouched low, covering her head as debris flew around her. Hale shouted to one of his men, "Get her to the shuttle, now." Private Ellis grabbed the child and ran, shielding her with his body. Hale and the others laid down covering fire, their rifles spitting bursts of energy into the advancing enemy. Several attackers fell, but more kept coming. Shouting in rage, Ellis made it halfway to the shuttle before a shot tore through his armor, dropping him to one knee. Gritting his teeth, he pushed the girl forward. "Go, run." She hesitated, tears streaming down her face, but another Marine scooped her up and kept moving. Behind them, the fight grew fiercer. One Marine went down, hit in the chest. Another took a blast to the shoulder, but kept firing. From the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Ward watched the chaos on the tactical screen. His fists tightened as he saw his people pinned down. "Get them out of there. Cover the shuttle with the forward guns." The Retribution's cannons roared, sending precise blasts into the enemy positions. Explosions tore through the ruins, scattering the attackers. The Marines used the opening to pull back toward the shuttle, carrying their wounded. The girl was the first aboard, pulled into the safety of the cabin by a medic. She clung to the photograph, her wide eyes darting from face to face. The Marines piled in after her, bloodied and exhausted. Hale was the last, his armor scorched, his breathing heavy. Go, go, go. He shouted, and the pilot lifted the shuttle off the ground. The city fell away beneath them, shrinking into a patchwork of fire and smoke. On the bridge, Ward let out a slow breath when he saw the shuttle clear the atmosphere. They had the girl, but the cost had been high. 2 Marines dead, 1 badly injured. When the shuttle docked, Ward went to meet them. The girl stood just behind Hale, clutching the photo. She looked up at the captain with a mixture of fear and confusion. Ward knelt so he was at her eye level. "You're safe now," he said softly. She didn't reply. She simply stared at him for a moment, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. The crew nearby fell silent. For a moment, the war felt far away. But Ward knew it wasn't. This was only one rescue in the middle of endless destruction. Tomorrow, there would be another mission, another order to follow. And maybe next time, there would be no voice calling from the ruins. Still, as he stood and watched the child led away by the medics, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. A small reminder of why saving even one life could matter. The girl was safe aboard the Retribution, and for a short while, the atmosphere on the ship felt lighter. The crew who had been part of the rescue were cleaning their weapons, tending to their wounds, and quietly talking about how close they had come to not making it back. The medics had given the girl clean clothes and food. But she still held on tightly to the photograph of her parents, never letting it out of her sight. Captain Ward went to check on her in the infirmary. She sat on a small bed, legs drawn up, eyes wide and cautious. When he stepped inside, she straightened, as if unsure whether she should be afraid. Ward spoke gently, asking her name. She whispered something in her language, and the translator gave the meaning. "Lyra." "Lyra," Ward repeated softly. "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." But even as he said it, a shadow of doubt flickered in his mind. The war was far from over, and safety on a warship was never absolute. Later that day, the Retribution continued toward its next target. Ward returned to the bridge, reviewing tactical maps, when the alarm suddenly sounded. A warning flashed across the main screen. Multiple unidentified ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel nearby. Commander Rin scanned the readings. "Small craft, heavily armed. They're coming straight for us." Ward's gut tightened. How did they know we were here? It didn't take long for the answer to appear. The communications officer's face went pale. "Sir, we've detected a signal being transmitted from inside the ship. It's on an encrypted enemy frequency." Ward's eyes narrowed. "From where?" The officer hesitated before saying it. "The infirmary." Without a word, Ward strode from the bridge, his boots striking the metal floor in sharp, angry steps. 2 Marines fell in beside him as he entered the medical bay. The medic stepped back, confused, as Ward's gaze locked on Lyra. In her hands was not just the photograph now, there was a small, round device, barely the size of a coin, glowing faintly. Ward crouched down in front of her, his voice calm but firm. "Lyra, who gave you that?" Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't answer. One of the Marines reached out to take the device, but Lyra suddenly shouted something in her language. The translator spat out the words. "They told me it would. Bring my family back." Before Ward could react, the ship shook violently. The enemy craft had opened fire. Red lights flashed, and the voice of the bridge officer came over the comm. "Multiple boarding pods incoming. They're targeting the lower decks." Ward's mind raced. The enemy had used Lyra to plant a beacon. They had followed it straight. To the Retribution, this was no random skirmish. It was a planned strike. "Seal the infirmary," Ward ordered. "Move her to the secure chamber." The Marines grabbed Lyra, pulling her toward the reinforced doors as the ship rocked from another impact. Somewhere below, metal screeched as boarding pods tore into the hull. Sirens wailed, and the sounds of gunfire echoed through the corridors. Ward sprinted back to the bridge. On the main display, he saw the enemy ships circling like vultures. The Retribution's gunners were returning fire, but the attackers were fast and maneuverable, darting in and out of range. Boarding teams were already inside the ship, and reports were coming in of firefights on multiple decks. "Cut off their landing parties," Ward barked. "Lock down the lower sections and vent the air if you have to." The crew obeyed, but the situation was messy. These enemy soldiers weren't here to destroy the ship outright. They were moving toward the section where Lyra was being held. That told Ward everything. She wasn't just a random survivor. She was valuable to them, maybe even the key to some larger plan in the secure chamber. Lyra sat against the wall, trembling as the sounds of battle grew closer. One of the Marines guarding her knelt down. "Why would you bring that device? Don't you know what they'll do to you if they take you back?" She shook her head, tears running down her cheeks. They said they'd give me my mother. They said if I called them, she would be waiting." The Marine's face hardened. They lied. Outside the chamber, heavy boots pounded the floor. Enemy soldiers rounded the corner, opening fire. The Marines returned shots, holding the line, but they were outnumbered. One by one, they fell back toward the chamber door. On the bridge, Ward made a decision. Reroute security drones to Corridor 7. Hold them there until I get down. He grabbed his sidearm and moved through the ship at a near run. The sound of gunfire grew louder with each step. When he turned the final corner, he saw the enemy. Pushing hard, their weapons lighting up the dark hallway. Ward didn't hesitate. He charged forward, firing with precision. 2 enemies went down instantly, and the rest scattered for cover. The Marines used the moment to push the attackers back. Ward reached the chamber door, slapped the security panel, and stepped inside. Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide and wet. "Stay." "Behind me," Ward told her. Another explosion shook the ship, and the lights flickered. The enemy had realized they couldn't win a boarding fight. They were retreating to their ships, but Ward knew this wouldn't be the end. They would come back, and next time, they'd bring more firepower. When the last of the attackers were gone, the crew began repairs. The corridors were littered with debris and scorch marks. 2 Marines were dead, 3 more injured, because of the beacon. Ward stood outside the chamber. Looking through the glass at Lyra, she sat with her knees pulled up, the photograph clutched tightly, the beacon gone. She wasn't a spy, she had been used. He could see that now. She was just a desperate child who had believed the lies of people she thought she could trust. Still, her presence had nearly gotten his crew killed. And Ward knew the questions from Earth's command would be harsh. Saving her had already been a risk. Keeping her aboard was going to be an even bigger one. But as he turned to leave, she looked up and whispered in broken English, "Sorry." Ward didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You're not the one who should be sorry." The Retribution hung in orbit above a dead, gray moon, its engines on low power, waiting. The scars from the boarding attack were still visible along the hull, black burns where enemy pods had punched through. Jagged holes, now patched with fresh plating. Inside, the crew moved with a heavy silence. Repairs had been made, but the real damage was not to the ship's metal. It was to its reputation. 3 days had passed since the ambush, and the official message from Earth's command had arrived. It wasn't written like a request. It was an order. Captain Elias Ward is to appear before the Tribunal of Strategic Command immediately to answer for violations of operational protocol. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew why. Ward had disobeyed a direct standing order. Atia stopped. Mission to save a single alien child, and in doing so, had brought enemy forces directly onto one of Earth's most valuable warships. 2 Marines were dead, 3 wounded, and Earth Command wanted answers. The jump to the secure station near Earth was tense. The crew avoided discussing the tribunal, but Ward could feel their unease. Some still supported his decision. Others wondered if the risk had been worth it. Even Commander Wren kept his opinions guarded, though his silence spoke volumes. When they arrived at the station, Ward didn't wear his ceremonial uniform. He walked into the tribunal chamber in his standard captain's attire, boots polished but jacket still bearing scorch marks from the boarding fight. The room was a wide, cold space with a high ceiling and bright white lights. At the far end sat 3 high-ranking officials, the tribunal. Their faces were stern, their uniforms flawless. Ward stood at the center of the chamber as the lead. Official Admiral Saren began. Captain Ward, you are here to answer for your actions during Operation Cleansing Blade, specifically your failure to maintain mission priority and your decision to endanger this vessel by engaging in an unauthorized rescue operation. Do you understand the charges? I do, Ward said, his voice calm. The second official, a sharp-eyed woman named Commodore Vance, leaned forward. 2 Marines dead, 3 injured. The retribution boarded for the first time in its history. All because you diverted for 1 life, an alien child, from the very species we were ordered to destroy. Why? Ward didn't flinch. Because she was alive, and she was calling for help. We were the only ones who could answer. Vance's expression hardened. We are not in the business of answering every cry for help, Captain. We are in the business of ensuring humanity survives. You've been in the field long enough to know that. Ward's gaze didn't drop. Yes, I know that. I've seen what happens when we fail to protect our people. But that girl was not a soldier. She was not a threat. Leaving her to die would not have made humanity any safer. Admiral Saren tapped a finger on the desk, and yet, saving her nearly cost us the retribution. That girl carried an enemy beacon onto this ship. Whether she knew it or not, she led their forces straight to us. Do you deny this? No, Ward admitted. But the beacon was planted without her knowledge. She was being used. The third official, a gray-haired general, spoke for the first time. Intentions are irrelevant. Outcomes are what matter. Your choice put this crew in jeopardy and compromised the mission. If every captain acted on personal feelings, the war would be lost within a year. Ward took a slow breath. With respect, sir, if every captain forgets what we're fighting for, we've already lost. There was a long silence after that. The officials exchanged glances. Ward stood still, refusing to show any hint of nervousness, though inside his pulse was steady but strong. Finally, Admiral Saren spoke again. Captain Ward, this tribunal finds you guilty of disobeying a direct operational directive. Under wartime regulations, this is grounds for immediate removal from command. The words struck the room like a cold wind. Some of the crew members, standing at the edges, stiffened, their faces grim. Ward kept his eyes on the tribunal. Saren continued, however, your record, your victories, and the fact that the retribution remains operational cannot be ignored. You have defended humanity more times than most officers here. That history has earned you a measure of consideration. Commodore Vance spoke again, her tone icy. You will retain command, but with strict oversight. All future missions will be monitored directly by Strategic Command. Any deviation from orders will result in immediate replacement. Is that clear? Crystal Ward said, though his voice carried no gratitude. The tribunal dismissed him, but as he turned to leave, Vance called after him. One more thing, Captain. That child you rescued, she is now classified as a potential intelligence, Ass said. She will be taken into custody here for questioning and assessment. Ward stopped. She's not a prisoner. She's a risk, Vance replied. Your personal feelings are noted, but they do not change policy. Ward's fists tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew pushing further here would only seal his removal. Without a word, he walked out of the chamber. Back on the Retribution, the crew was waiting. They wanted to know if he would still be their captain. When he stepped aboard, their quiet relief was visible, though it was tempered by the knowledge that strategic command now had its claws in their operations. Later, Ward went to the secure compartment where Lyra was being kept until transfer. She looked up at him, her small hands clutching the photograph, as always. "They say I have to go," she said in her broken English. Ward knelt beside her. "For now, but I'll see you again." She frowned, clearly not believing him. Everyone says that. Then they don't come back. He had no promise to give. Her, not one he could keep. But he placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "I'm not everyone." Hours later, Lyra was taken off the ship under guard. Ward watched from the bridge as the transport shuttle carrying her drifted away, bound for the station. Commander Wren stood beside him. "Sir, was it worth it?" Ward didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the shrinking dot of the shuttle in the black of space. "Ask me when the war's over," he said finally. But deep inside, he knew he didn't need the war to end to know the truth. The Retribution drifted in the darkness between stars, its engines quiet, its course uncertain. Days had passed since the tribunal, but the tension on the ship still hung in the air like an invisible weight. Every officer knew they were being watched. Strategic Command had tied their missions to strict oversight, sending constant updates and orders from afar. The warship that had once roamed freely now felt like it was on a leash. Captain Ward sat in his quarters, staring at the small hollow display on his desk. It showed the next mission orders another strike, another world to burn. The target was not a major military base, but a mid-sized colony with suspected enemy sympathizers. Intelligence admitted they had no proof, only probable activity. Ward's jaw tightened. He could already imagine the streets, the faces of people who might have no connection to the war. Turning to ash under the Retribution's guns, his mind went back to Lyra, to her small voice and the way she had clutched that photograph. He wondered where she was now, what they were doing to her, and if she was safe. He doubted she was. To Command, she wasn't a child. She was a potential weapon. Ward closed the orders and sat in silence. He thought about every mission they had carried out in the past months, the cities they had destroyed, the lives they had taken without hesitation. He had always told himself it was to protect humanity. But lately, the line between protection and revenge was fading. Maybe it had already disappeared. On the bridge, Commander Wren was overseeing the crew when Ward stepped in. He didn't sit in his command chair right away. Instead, he stood in the center of the bridge and looked at every officer present. "I have reviewed our orders," he began. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it that made the crew straighten. "Command wants us to destroy another colony. Civilian or not, it doesn't matter to them." No one spoke, but a few exchanged uneasy glances. Ward continued, "We've done everything they've asked. We've followed their orders without question. But I have to ask you now, how many more times are we going to kill people who aren't fighting us?" The silence grew heavier. Finally, Wren stepped forward. "Sir, what are you saying?" Saying?" Ward replied that the Retribution is no longer going to be their executioner. Gasps and whispers rippled through the bridge. The communications officer turned sharply. "Sir, if we go against Command, we'll be branded as traitors." Ward nodded. "Yes, and if we keep following them, we'll be remembered as butchers." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his crew. "I won't force anyone to stay. If you want to leave when we dock for supplies, you'll have that chance. But as long as you're here, we're not burning another world for someone's politics." The crew exchanged looks, but no one spoke up to oppose him. A few faces showed quiet relief. Others looked conflicted. Ward walked to his chair and sat down. Helm set a new course, somewhere far from command's reach. The helmsman hesitated for only a second before answering. "Aye, Captain." The retribution turned slowly in the void, its new heading taking it away from the planned target. In that moment, the ship crossed an invisible line. It was no longer a weapon of Earth command. It was something else now, something independent and dangerous. Over the next weeks, the retribution operated in the shadows. It intercepted pirate fleets, attacking unarmed transports. It raided enemy supply lines but left civilian convoys untouched. It defended remote human outposts that command had abandoned. And, sometimes, it even protected alien settlements under threat, striking down those who preyed on the weak, no matter what species they were. News of the warship's actions spread quickly. To some, the retribution became a savior, an unpredictable force that could appear out of nowhere to stop an attack. To others, it was a rogue element, a dangerous ship captained by a man who no longer obeyed his own government. Command sent messages demanding Ward return to Earth for debriefing. He ignored them. Then they sent bounty hunters and covert strike teams. None returned. One night, while the ship drifted near the wreckage of a pirate vessel they had just destroyed, Ward stood alone in the observation deck. The stars glimmered beyond the glass, cold and silent. Footsteps approached, and Commander Rin joined him. "You know they'll never stop coming after us," Rin said quietly. "I know," Ward replied, "but they'll have to find us first." Rin studied him for a moment, then asked, "Why keep doing this, Captain? We can't save everyone. You know that?" Ward didn't take his eyes off the stars. "I know, but saving some is better than saving none. We can keep even a few from ending up like Lyra. Then it's worth it." Rin nodded slowly. "The crew's with you. For now. Just make sure we're not becoming the thing we're running from." Ward glanced at him and gave a faint smile. "That's the point, Rin. We're going to make sure we don't." As the retribution powered up its engines again, its course unknown to anyone but the crew, its legend began to grow. Across the galaxy, people whispered about the human warship that could burn planets to nothing, but sometimes chose not to. To enemies, it was a ghost of destruction. To those it saved, it was the only hope in a war without mercy. And somewhere deep inside, Ward knew that as long as the retribution kept moving, there was still a chance to write a different kind of story for humanity, one where strength was not only measured by how much it could destroy, but by how much it chose to protect.